So our next speaker is Pete Bauman. You've seen Pete a couple of times already, so he doesn't really need an introduction. He's going to be talking about seed testing at SDSU or beyond? A little bit of both. Looks like he has prizes too.
You have prizes. We got to wake the crowd up. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anthony, for that. Anthony's a great resource in that program. So, sorry about that. There's a good chance this is going to break. So, whose first exposure to every acre counts was that? Just kind of a show of hands. A few of you. Wow. Maybe 15. So that is a fantastic program. Can't say enough good about it. I think sometimes Anthony is a little bit modest with the impact that program can have on a farm or a ranch. And it's really data driven, which sounds kind of dorky, but man, you start showing people their yield maps, and their world just expands on that. So that's a kind of a cool program. All right, so today we took a lot of philosophy yesterday. We kind of led this agenda, whether it worked or not, we hope it did, but we're trying to take everybody from kind of, the morning session was recognition of teams and working with teams and trying to find your people. I think Don said that a few times. I think that's a really good term. Working into then, okay, once you try to create a team, how do you work within a team? And then we're just kind of keeping progressing. And so today is a little bit more schoolish, and it starts with seed testing. So now we're to the point where everybody wants to be is like, what does it actually mean to create seed mixes and things? And we started this session yesterday, had some great sessions. But today I'm going to talk, this session is just going to be about the seed itself. Like, what is it that we're harvesting? What is it that what's the quality? And how do we find that out? So again, thanks to the partners. This particular talk kind of focuses on Game Fishing Parks, Nature Conservancy, SDSU, Renovo, which is the rebranded Millborn for their wildland seed, and then our seed testing lab at SDSU. And there's several other seed testing labs available. So we got a bunch of seed, bulk harvested or whatever, and how do we know what we have? The process, Joe walked through this really well yesterday, so I'm not going to talk too much about what that meant, what it means to bulk harvest, but these are just kind of more pictures of what the volume of bulk harvested seed can really look like, as you go, Joe had mentioned kind of acre for acre, so it can be a lot of volume. And understanding what's in it is, I think Joe mentioned this yesterday, but the first thing of bulk harvest seed that I think that most of us, if not all of us, would agree on is if you intend to harvest seed, you got to do some work on the front end to make it a harvestable site. And one of those core things is usually it's a prescribed fire, which we understand to really help seed quality, seed quantity, etc. And I'm going to get into that here a little bit. So when you send seed off for a test, this is a single source test. This is one species. And this is the test that I ordered and got back. So what I wanted to know is on this particular species, I can't read. What do I have down in the corner? Oh, Blazing Star. Okay. So I wanted to know what the viability of the Blazing Star was off of my own little project. And so I sent that in, and what I ordered was what's called a telazol test. And for those of you that understand this, you're going to have to just bear with me, but I think there's a lot of people in the room that maybe have never really seen or heard of this before. So what a TZ test does is it gives you an idea of what the viability of that seed is. It's a chemical test. It's not a growth test. So that TZ test yielded that 23% of that Blazing Star seed was viable. That's just essentially what that says. Okay, pretty simple. Our second example of a test then would be to expand that and say, okay, now I got this bulk harvest. I went out and I ran my combine or my seed stripper. I want to know what's in that seed lot. So typically what we might order is say, give us and so on the right-hand side, this is our test example. This is kind of how it was, or what we're providing the lab. That's what I always have listed over here. And here's the things that we wanted to know. So in this case, we want to know You guys following that over on this side? Okay. What we want to know is that I want to know the top 10 or 15 species, the viability of those species, the purity, which I'll explain here in a little bit, and then what weeds might be present. And this is how it's laid out on the test. So all of the species are listed. They're lined up with their relative purity. The overall purity of the test is here. Weeds are listed on the bottom. Now, I explained what viability is with the telazol test. So in this case, that is, looks like Solidago, is that right? Which is goldenrod. So the TZ test says it's about 40% viable. But what purity means is that of that seed lot, 7% of the lot is actual that species of seed. It doesn't tell you how viable the seed is, okay? So the purity of this entire seed lot is 14%, meaning basically that there's 86% other stuff other than quality seed, okay? It's really important. From that number then is how we get to what we understand to be pure live seed. So I'm trying to set the stage here for you a little bit and walk you through this. What noxious weeds are listed on the bottom. Oh, I think I already just explained that. So the overall purity overall seed purity in a bulk harvest is all relatively very low. And so when you go to Joe's acre for acre, you know, it really kind of makes sense in how he does things, because like you might be harvesting an acre, but think of that at only 14 or 15% of all those bags that I showed you even have a chance of actually being a seed. So there's a lot of junk. When we know that, though, once we know our purity and we know our viability, we can start to calculate what the pure live seed rate is based on those two numbers. And then if we actually, in this case, actually weigh some of this stuff, we can scale back out on bulk harvest to actually know what the pure live seed of our seed lot is in a bulk harvest mix, okay? This is an important thing because most of the program mixes require certain seeds per square foot or certain percentages. We actually can get there with bulk harvest, and we'll talk about that a lot, like kind of at the end of the day today. But when you don't know what's in your seed lot, that's what testing can do for us. Okay, so if we go to our example 3 now, here we have a hand harvested site. So now this is going out and specifically selecting. Joe kind of covered that yesterday in the early part of his talk. You can see that the purity of the lot goes up significantly when we're targeting that seed and picking it. And then you might ask, well, why is it not 100%? If I'm going and physically picking the seed, why would it be anything less? But if you've picked seed, you know that it's impossible to pick seed cleanly. You know, when, if you're going out and just hand stripping, say, big blue stem off of a plant, yeah, you're targeting the seed. You're not getting all the stems and leaves and all that stuff that you might get in a bulk harvest. But you're still getting all the awns and a lot of inert matter, little stems, and there's just a lot of other inert matter. But still, about 50% is where this one tested out. So it's much higher in a hand harvest. Again, hand harvest, it's pretty rare that you're going to have any weeds because you're physically selecting that. Now, if you use one of those little machines and stuff that Joe's was showing, yeah, you might run into a different plant, but certainly more selective. Make sure. Yeah. So here we have a bulk harvest native lot, and we wanted to test the viability of the top 5 species or so, and we wanted to request information on the remainder, all the species present. But look at, I thought I had some arrows on this one, but I don't. So no noxious weeds found in this bulk harvest, but a few other species, green foxtail included. You know, those are just things that we typically are going to have in a bulk harvest. So what we really want to avoid is noxious, and if we find a noxious weed, there's a very low threshold for noxious on those, but oftentimes bulk harvested seed is really not traded or sold on the open market, so the noxious weed thing becomes, it's kind of a self-use if you end up, and typically what would be found on those noxious in a bulk harvest. Occasionally you might find that they'll run across like one Canada thistle seed or a single seed or two of, say, wormwood sage. But our bulk harvest operators, typically with their agents, they're within the agencies or the NGOs, and they do very well operating those combines. So, but then you can request a total list of all seeds present as well. That was the SDSU seed lab reports. This is just another example from the NST labs, how they do their reports. Same information, just kind of arranged differently on the report. So I'm not advocating that one or the other, but all of them have the ability to give you the report on those key categories of species, viability, purity. You can even order a grow test on those that really is like an actual true germination test, but the results come back quite a bit later. I guess I have to make the point of why am I even sharing all this, is that if you do a bulk harvest native seed lot and you're willing to wait about 48 hours, you can get this information back before you go plant it. It can help you adjust your planting rates. Joe's doing some side trials on this right now. Did you mention those yesterday, Joe? He did not. It's something that Joe and I have just been kicking around, like how much can we be just a little bit more knowledgeable about those bulk harvest rates? And it starts with maybe being a little patient to not just kick it right back out in the field, but wait a couple days to get the test results back. I know SDSU is super fast on our test results. Okay, so now this example 5, this is customer purchase seed. So I wanted full disclosure here. I'm going to be using data from a seed test from Millborn Seeds. I called Millborn and I let them know that I was going to be talking about them just out of courtesy. You know, we work for the university and everything we do is unbiased. It's just that these were the tests that I had available to me to run through this process. So Game Fish and Parks had purchased a few seed lots for some of our mutual restoration sites. And what we wanted to do is just do an independent test on weeds. I was just curious, like, you know, how this whole thing really works when you buy a seed. Is there weed seed in it? You know, because you get the report from the grow house or the distributor. They're doing their best to test for it, but I just wanted to run a couple independent tests. So on this particular seed lot, purity was sky high, and it should be, right? It's a purchased seed lot. It should be almost all pure seed, and that was great. If you get over 90%, that's really good. As far as the noxious and common weeds, though, I'm still having a hard time actually reading. So we had Horriga chest, pigweed, velvet leaf on the noxious side, and then rough cinquefoil and yellow foxtail. Okay, so then you have to understand, we're going to have a conversation on this a little bit later. These are, none of these are noxious weeds in South Dakota. But when you run this, you can order this USA noxious test. That's what I wanted to know. I just wanted to kind of get an idea of what's all. So across the country, these are noxious somewhere, right? Pigweed is always going to show up on this test because it's such a hard seed to define. They don't know if it's palm or amaranth or not. That hasn't been a huge issue here in South Dakota yet, but we've had some cases. So there's a discretionary decision on this. I'm not worried about any of this. If you look at the level of, it's like one seed in the test lot, so it could be there, but it's pretty common stuff. Then when we get into all of those seed lots, so I apologize. I know this is, I don't even know if you can see this. I had to kind of try to jam this in. The bottom line is that there was 15 weed species found in these across four purchased seed lots, right? Point is that when we're buying, this is not a pure industry, and no one's claiming that it is, but we shouldn't expect perfection. For many of the seed houses that we get seed from, there's going to be this slight level of messiness to it. And I'll explain that here in a little bit, but in reality, the purity tests are really high. The species that show up are really not all that concerning to me. Hairy chest, pigweed, velvet leaf, rough cinquefoil, yellow foxtail, lamb's quarters, and sweet clover. I hate sweet clover, but I do understand that there's a chance that's going to be. It's not that they sneak it into your mix. It's just that it's impossible to sort all these seeds down as the size that they are. You know, when you go buy corn, you're buying corn. Everything else is not corn. When you're buying a mixed lot, you think of the culmination of sources and processing and mixing and handling, and it's really not too hard to believe that there's a few weed seeds in those mixes. So generally speaking, I talked to the guys at Millborn, and I asked them, I said, what are the protocols? I talked to Brett Blank, and I had quite a conversation on it. I talked to Ryan Marr. Ryan's in the room somewhere. Where's Ryan? There's Ryan. We had these conversations like, well, we've been doing this for years, and has anybody really asked, like, what are the protocols in the seed industry? You know, tagging and certifying and all these things. And this is pretty interesting. So again, this is Millborn, and I think they think that their protocols are pretty representative of the industry. So they shoot for 85% germ and 85% purity on their incoming seed lots. So if they're purchasing seed at wholesale from someone, they want to see their test out to this. They want to see a very low level of weeds that are non-noxious, and then they can purchase and clean. If they have a higher percentage of weeds, they might reject that seed lot altogether and say, you know, it's just not worth our effort. It's just kind of a return on investment for them. If it's noxious in other states, they'll label it to the state that seed lot can and cannot be sold to. I think that sounds like it's pretty smart business. But then if it's got South Dakota noxious, it's illegal to transport and sell and trade that anyway. So that's a seed lot. If it's got noxious, they're not going to buy it, and they're not going to take it in, and they're not going to redistribute it. Now, that's based on the test. It doesn't mean that those things still can't happen, but that's the integrity rule that they try to follow at that shop. As far as their retail side, then they want to sell seed that tests out at least 85% pure and 85% germ, making sure that the customer has a quality product. I asked them very specifically, there generally is no weed-free guarantee. They can't guarantee that. They can basically base their guarantee on item number one, that they try their best. The thing about it is I didn't really think about it from a business standpoint. So I know I purchased one lot of seed personally that I was pretty sure had sweet clover in it, and I was like, I don't really like that, right? And I, you know, from a purchaser's perspective, I was like, you know, I paid for this, and I didn't want to buy or pay for sweet clover. And then I was talking to them, and they're like, you know what? You actually didn't. You purchased and bought this. The rest of that is just stuff. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's one way to look at it, right? Like, I didn't pay for the sweet clover. It just happened to be in there. And it wasn't a lot. But the point is that at the end of the day, it's a fairly messy industry. Kind of. I mean, I shouldn't say it that way. It's very well managed. It's hard to weed everything out. Okay, so the next bit of this, then, we're going to talk about some of the seed tests, actual results from these local harvests, and I'm going to focus mostly on Nature Conservancy harvest sites in eastern South Dakota and western Minnesota. I'm not going to, this is for my benefit. You know, I don't expect you to look at this entire graph, but what did we actually find in bulk harvest tests then? And occasionally we have brome and Kentucky bluegrass that showed up. These I was able to get tealazole tests back. So look at the viability of the bluegrass and brome. It's pretty high. 50% of the Kentucky bluegrass seed was viable, and 85 to 90% of the brome seed is viable. So that's a reality of bulk seed harvest. Probably it's almost impossible to run a combine across the prairie and not pick some of this stuff up. Going a little further, picking up sweet clover, 70 to 80% viable in that harvest. But also, these are the other species, the exotic forbs that were in those bulk harvest mixes cumulatively. A little bit of wormwood. We picked up a little bit of, I don't know. Okay, so another thing I didn't explain is that sometimes on the seed test, they'll take a plant that's native or quasi-native, and they'll plop it in the weed category, because maybe I didn't ask directly about it. So here, like, you'll see yarrow shows up kind of on the weed list. I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about yarrow, but sow thistle sometimes shows up. These are not uncommon things, you know. So it's like, what do you do with that seed lot where you know these things occur, and it's a judgment call. On site, you know, harvested from the site to the site, like a lot of the agencies do with their restorations, probably not a big deal. But it's just a reality that these things do show up. And then sometimes there's unknowns that just can't be identified as well. They don't show up at a very high level. Okay, now the viability. When I started this talk, I said, you know, we typically burn to increase viability and productivity of our seed lots, and that's very true. The standard viability this is the viability of forbs, a few select forbs in these seed lots. So we've got things like asters, we got purple coneflower, oxeye. Every one of these colors represents a different forb that we got test results from. I know you can't probably read everything, but every block is a different forb. And these numbers over here is if I was able to accumulate more than one TZ test, I put that over here as a block. And so this entire block of data is from seed sources that were pre-burned and bulk harvested with no grazing, okay? No grazing prior to harvest. And our average of those numbers is listed here. So anywhere from a low of like 19 to a high of, you know, 60, 70, 77%, et cetera. My intention was to compare this data, you know, those aren't bad numbers for viability. But I wanted to compare this data against, like, what did we know about unburned, just general background viability of native seeds out there, right? I had a hard time finding this. I was surprised. I got some information, but there's not a lot of science and tests on that. I thought that, actually, to be quite honest, I punted on that to do it the last day of getting ready for this presentation. I was like, I'll be able to find that pretty easy. I couldn't. I found some references that said that native seed just out there growing on the broadleaf plants, somewhere maybe between 40%, 12 to 40 generally, not very high. I'm not sure if that's true, but I actually thought that our numbers from our burn sites would stack up higher than this on those forbs, because usually when we burn, it just makes those forbs pop. So I think what we definitely get is a lot higher volume of seed opportunity, but I'm not sure on if it's a dramatic increase in viability over just going out and picking. I'm just not sure. Okay, so now we're going to do something fun, all right? What we're going to do is we're going to go into grasses now. So same thing, bulk harvested, pre-burned native grasses, sometimes up to 10 or so samples. And we're going to compare the results of those to hand-picked burned. So this is bulk harvested, and here's hand-picked seed, which should be more targeted. And then against grasses that were just simply harvested off of a pasture that was grazed until July 15th, and then they went out and hand-picked seed to see, to test the theories of viability and pre-burning and all that. All right, so who wants to play a game? I need 3 volunteers. Come on. You win if you volunteer an SDSU mug full of cash. All right? All right, Charlie just volunteered because he said something. All right. Charlie, since you volunteered first, do you want to pick for the highest viability of native seed, door number 1, which is bulk harvested, pre-burned in the spring, kind of what Joe presented yesterday. Door number 2, which is pre-burned in the spring and selected by hand. or door number 3, which was grazed all spring and then just picked by hand what was left. No burning involved. You're going to go with door number 3. All right. Obviously uneducated. Sorry. That's a shot at Charlie. All right. Charlie's got door number 3. Who wants any volunteers for door number 2? Dan Sternhagen takes door number 2. And who chimed up? You don't want 1? Does anybody want door number 1? Jay Herman has, oh, I'm sorry, you guys, okay. So the other contestants that don't win a highly prized SDSU insulated bag that you can only get for free everywhere, okay? So, all right, here we go. Under door number 1. Oh, wait, I forgot. We need help. We need help. Now, I grew up in the era of Vanna White looking pretty good, and she still looks fine, but I think somebody looks better. So we're going to have another helper come in. Oh, and what's behind door number 1? We've got our average viability, which is on the bottom of all of these bulk harvested pre-burn sites. Average viability of all of our native grasses when we put them together, about 73%. Not bad, Jay Herman. Not bad. Nice job. Oh, and what's behind door number 2? Those are the hand-picked sites, same treatments. Oh my, we got 84%. That should make a lot of good sense, shouldn't it? 84%, we went out and picked those by hand. Who's door number 2? Dan Sternhagen. Nice job, Dan. Good job. Okay, now we got Charlie Totten. Charlie's going with the cows, right? Every time, Charlie's going to go with the cows. Behind door number 3, 92%. Now, again, this is pretty biased stuff. It's a single source. Rick Smith picked that off his pastures in Hamlin County. I was driving down to SDSU to get my other tests done, and I'm like, who do I know that's got just native seed, native pasture that I can just swing in and have them pick some? And I called Rick. I'm like, you got a pretty good variety of native grasses in your pasture. And he's like, yeah, they were all grazed till July 15th. I said, he's like, but they got seed heads hanging on them yet. I'm like, would you go pick them? So he picked 4 different species. And I was surprised, honestly. So it made me start thinking about what we all have as our own paradigm in seed harvest. And I will advocate for pre-burning every time because we know we get so much bulk out of that. That's not really debatable, I don't think. But the viability actually might not be all that different than a good viability in a good growing year like we saw this year. So I'd put that out there as food for thought. So good job, Charlie. You win your. Where did I put your bucket full? Yeah, it's full of cash, I swear. Okay, and I think that was it. So I just wanted to end on that. I don't know, Josh, how are we doing on time? Okay. I'm not going to take more time. I think we'll move on to the next thing, but we're going to have open discussion yet, a couple times today. You may have questions about all this. I wish I could have told you, as I wish this entire class, and I hope that you understand. I think Josh even suggested that, we maybe should call this the art and science. This is the part of this whole thing about establishment. It seems like every time we share something, there's shades of gray, right? I didn't anticipate that result, but it was the result, and it's worth sharing. Is that, maybe those that are out hand picking aren't wasting their time at all. As far as some of these species that I've always thought it had to be a pre-burn site myself just to make the effort worth it. We never had any data to show otherwise, and I think we've all kind of been brought up in an era that's like, as managers, we're just told that I've been told this for 30 years, never presented any proof that it was actually true. I'm not sure I'm totally questioning all of it, but I do have some questions now, so appreciate it.